The Patriot Act of 2001 resembles the Enabling Act of 1933. Most people will be surprised that the Enabling Act of 1933 was enacted by the Third Reich in Nazi Germany, and not in America. For the people who would still support the Patriot Act after all we know about the integrity of today's politicians, I will go over many reasons why the Patriot Act has nothing to do with terrorism. If interested in hearing more on the similarities of the Patriot Act and the Enabling Act, you should follow the links here that are also below the video. The concept of the war on terror is fallacious. Anyone can be a terrorist. The biggest fear tactic in recent history is the war on terror. This can be reworded as the war on being scared and can be related to similar tactics. Any Russian with a computer seems to use spam for marketing. This well-known parent, Jenny McCarthy, uses timeouts when previously she was a Playboy playmate and a talk show host. Before steroids, Mark and Jose might have used bunting as a tactic between hitting home runs. On his way to millionaire status, this man probably had to make some cold calls to raise money and sell his ideas. Here, a former Berkeley professor turned terrorist and became known as the Unabomber. A former patriot who was in Desert Storm was out for revenge against the U.S. government in 1993 for the government's massacre in Waco, Texas. What about this well-educated doctor who practiced medicine throughout the 80s and became Al-Qaeda's number 2 in command in the 90s? And finally, over-medicated nerdy white kids turned to terrorism in 1999. Yes, even though they didn't use a bomb or praise Allah, they are terrorists. The bottom line is a tactic can be adopted and implemented by anyone with little or no training. Another aspect in recent history to realize the war on terror is false is the open border policy the U.S. shares with Mexico. There are supposedly two wars going on around the U.S.-Mexico border: the war on terror and the war on drugs. The war on drugs is another topic regarding lies and perpetual war. Why is it that the border can't be secured? Israel has a secure border. North Korea secures its border. Soviet Russia was able to keep people within the walls of Berlin for about 30 years. Even the Minuteman Project, who are a National Citizens Neighborhood Watch, had success in decreasing drug trafficking on the parts of the border where they were located. I'm not making an argument for secure borders. I'm making an argument that during any war on terror, or even the perpetual war on drugs, the border where the most illegal trafficking happens is the border that should be most secure. The border from September 11, 2001 to now has never been secured as though there was any security threat. After September 11th, the airports were closed, all flights canceled, border checkpoints were closed, but nothing was done to increase security on the border. The people and the precious drugs still flowed as free as they did before. You would think that to make it look good, right after 9/11, President Bush would have militarized the borders and would have probably shot on sight anyone attempting to cross, just like Flight 93 or any other hijacked plane would have been shot down before it was allowed to hit its target. Then I would imagine the borders would go back to normal when the military was sent to invade Iraq in 2003. We didn't have secure borders because we never had a war on terrorism. How can DHS have numbers of apprehended foreign nationals in these numbers if we constantly are under a threat of terrorism? Keep in mind the operative word is apprehended. How many more were never caught? The past 10 years is another place to find evidence that the war on terror is simply a tactic used by the government to justify trampling on the Constitution, civil liberties, and the American way of life. Most recently, there is the body scanners and the TSA pat-downs. The most recent Government Accountability Office reports that the scanners fail more than not, and Congressman Micah on March 16, 2011, had a hearing to this fact.
Have you have been briefed by GAO on their testing?
Yes, I have.
And you find that acceptable level of performance?
I'd like to think that we could perform very well at 100%.
Do you find the level of failure acceptable that GAO has reported now that you have the equipment in place?
So the specific number, I think we...
Oh, first of all, we're not going to talk about numbers because it's classified, but the failure is has been pronounced. Mr. Pistol talked to it. Mr. Pistol said it was that GAO was clever. Do you feel that again, having reviewed this, is that failure rate acceptable? We was going to spend $250 million on deploying this equipment and staffing it, and I've had it tested, and to me it's not acceptable.
So I would like to see us do better against GAO testing. I don't think that's representative.
If the American public, if we could reveal
technology.
the failure rate, the American public would be outraged at that expenditure. But it seems that you have opted for sort of a popularity poll. You said that 80% of the people do not object to accept the use of that technology, even though it doesn't work. So that's the basis on which we deploy expensive screening technology?
No, Congressman, I think that's a partial basis, but I think the other extensive testing that we did in the labs, that we did in the field, and that we do in the airports every day.
Well, the public may accept it, but I'm telling you, I will not. Thank you, and I yield back.
So if the GAO has tested these body scanners to show that they fail more than they are accurate, why are the American people subjected to this form of treatment? The underwear bomber was allowed to get on the plane. There were many warnings about this guy from his own father. And he was already on the terrorist watch list. So how could someone on the terrorist watch list get on any international flight? More recently than that, Fox News ran a program called The Secrets of 9/11 on May 20th, 2011, revealing many points where the U.S. government knew about most of the hijackers and failed to push and follow up on the leads they had. The U.S. just didn't pursue the intel they had. There wasn't any Patriot Act at the time, and they had all they needed to investigate and very likely stop the 9/11 attacks. There was also knowledge of the threat of the terrorist attack in the FBI. Just do a search for Harry Sammet. See all the links below to find references to see how the U.S. government had all they needed without the Patriot Act to investigate all known terrorists in the U.S. There is even a complete timeline showing how the U.S. had followed or initiated the organization of terrorist groups in the world. The point has been to get the American people used to government intrusion. Where the full intentions of the U.S. government might end up is securing the internet, full body scanners for airport, bus, and train stations, Europe-style closed-caption television, in other words, cameras everywhere, and the only sector of the population against such intrusion are some moderate liberals and libertarians. Republicans seem to be more interested in protecting George Bush's legacy rather than admitting his presidency was an absolute failure. Unfortunately, the liberals who had regular protests against George Bush have gone completely silent now that Barack Obama is president. In order to keep the U.S. a free society, we're going to need to put our vote behind anyone who is committed to the U.S. Constitution. You will hear the people worth voting for use the Constitution in their arguments and reasoning when voting against most Democrats' social agenda or the Republicans' need for securing a police state. While you wait to hear from these people, please read up by starting with the links below.